So I would like to welcome everybody to this clinic session of today. I've been asked to moderate this session. I will try and do my best in moderating it. I will try to look at the chat on my screen, and I'll try to look at the questions coming in the Slido at the same time. And you can all see the questions coming into the Slido. They are moving very fast, so I will not be able to deal with them at this pace, but I will pick out a few of the questions. But before I do that, I would like to give a disclaimer. We do not have the people of the panel of today on COVID-19 in this session. Maybe later on, Guy Cochrane will join for part of the session. So these clinics were intended to ask any general questions or particular questions about the EOSC developments. So if you have any questions that regard, please go ahead. If you have questions on COVID-19, don't hesitate to put them. We will try to answer them to the best of our abilities, and I'm sure Guy Cochrane will help us in doing that. Sarah, I see two questions now. Are these the two questions that come in on this session? Oh, Guy is already here. Welcome, Guy. Thank you very much for letting us know.
Yeah, so these are the latest questions that have been entered in the Slido. Probably they are related to the previous.
Yeah, they are also related because one is on S-Freeze and the other one is for Jan Huzak. So I have not seen any questions either in the Slido or in the chat coming in. There is one, I think, now. Anyone still using the layer model in writing the wave report? I'm not aware of that. That is probably a question. Who could answer that question? Anybody on board that could answer this question? I'm not even familiar with this model, so I cannot answer this.
This is a model, this is a report from 2010. I've just followed the link. A final report of the high-level expert group on scientific data, a submission to the European Commission.
And this is the first high-level expert group on EOSC, which was shared by Barend Mons?
No, this is from 2010, Karel.
Ah, okay.
No, this is 10 years ago.
Not familiar with it. Are you?
How Europe can gain from the rising tide of scientific data? No, I mean I haven't seen this report. It's still under Nelly Kroes.
Okay. Any other questions? Please shoot.
And the high-level expert group was chaired by John Wood.
Yeah. These both questions on the screen come from Barbara Ebert. Maybe Barbara, you could open up your microphone and help us.
And explain the model.
Yes.
And then we can answer.
Hi, Barbara. Welcome.
Hello. Let me quickly organize my screen. Yes, I was starting this question because of this horizontal metaphor we heard earlier in Jan's talk. So who's acting horizontally, who's acting vertically in the system of infrastructures, and what this model really is a layer model where everything is vertical. So you have at the bottom, you have the e-infrastructure and the storage capacities and the scientific calculation capacities, and then you have layers that get more and more domain specific up to the individual researcher. And I find that model still useful. So it's an old report, I know, but it started a lot of things, for example, RDA Europe, and it may be useful to just go back to this view of things, also sorting what is generic and what is more domain specific, and how do these layers interact in EOSC or in national systems.
good suggestion, Barbara. We will sure look at it. And what you described is in line with my view of having, let's say, a number of founding layers on which to build. For example, for me, the research infrastructures are built on the layer of e-infrastructures, etc. So I will definitely we will definitely take a look at it. Thank you for suggesting that.
Sorry, I have something to add because I'm trying to take notes. I'm the rapporteur of this and talk at the same time, so it's not quite so. Sorry. Theo Wien actually wrote a report. So Theo Wien is responsible for researcher engagement, and we did refer to this report when we came up with the first collection of services after the very first workshop. I'm not really quite sure if we did exactly what you referred to, but we are aware of this report and we're using it. For example, in this report, Riding the Wave, there's this part about scientific e-infrastructures and challenges to overcome, like the trust issue. This is, for example, something that's coming up all the time within our research, within our task. So we are aware of this report and we are using it, and we'd be happy if you have some ideas of how to better involve these kind of things. So if you get in touch later on, we could talk about that further.
Okay, thank you very much, Katrina. I would like to make a general announcement. Guy Cochrane can only join us until 2 o'clock. So if you would have any questions on COVID-19, then please put them now, because after that it will be more difficult to answer. Let's move on. Thank you, Barbara, with the second question that is on projects currently on the S3 roadmap, but not legal entity, are also important to take into account, as they can directly share data in a fair manner. And the answer to that is yes, absolutely. This is an issue in broad terms. There are a lot of organizations, projects, whatever, that produce useful material and are not a legal entity. So they cannot be a member of the EOSC association, but that doesn't mean that they cannot be a member of the EOSC ecosystem. I hope that the EOSC ecosystem, where we combine and federate all data, will be much larger than, well, only, I'm not degrading the association, but then only the members of the association. So for us, the EOSC ecosystem is not equal to the EOSC association. Anything, Catherine, you would like to add here?
No, I think that summarizes it very well, Karel.
Okay, thank you very much. Then the next question: what are the main barriers today to do efficient research? Is it the lack of resources, APIs, protocols, metadata, or politics? Well, politics are always a barrier for everything. So let's not discuss those, otherwise we will not finish today. But I don't think there is one of those that is a particular barrier to all of the researchers. So in some of the research, resources are definitely a problem. Some of the research domains have much more resources historically or for whatever reasons. Some of the research domains, for example, in the data sciences domain, are perfectly able to deal with APIs. Others have not yet dealt with that. But in general, I would say protocols and metadata are important for every domain. So if the domains do not have those, please start working on them. And then that will definitely help their research and make their research more, let's say, shareable and thus more efficient, I hope. But I don't think there's one barrier for all the researchers. Then the next one is EOSC iterations will tackle research data exploitation by public administration and the private sector. Do you see a role for EOSC in the interoperability beyond research data? That's a very, very good question, to be honest. We have clearly seen over time that interoperability is domain related and that FAIR is domain related, so that these agreements on interoperability and making data interoperable have also something to do with the domain. And if the domain widens to the public administration, an important domain, by the way, I think for many researchers, and the private sector, then I think the interoperability in those domains have to be tackled. But there is not one interoperability protocol I think you can use for the private sector. Because again, the private sector is a very broad domain. It can be logistics, it can be the mobile world, it can be the banks, can be basically everything. So yes, the answer is there is a role for EOSC there, but it's not, EOSC is not going to solve this. And I hope that by joining with the public administration and the private sector, we can tackle some of these. There is a question from Bert Meerman coming in for Guy Cochrane. First of all, he says an excellent presentation this morning on the COVID-related initiatives. What is your view on centralizing versus decentralizing COVID data? Guy, could you answer this question?
Sure, thanks for the question, yeah. Well, I think what's emerged is a mixture of the two. In some cases, there's a tradition of handling a particular data type in a very centralized model where there's almost a single geographical location and a single group of people who do all the management. And in other areas, things are fully decentralized. The pattern is, I think, that when we get to patient-related data, where there are privacy issues, GDPR issues, there tends to be at least a national level treatment. So there's decentralization at least to the national level for those data. But when we're dealing with research data from the biological domain, where you don't have those privacy issues, so things about viruses or about cell lines and animal models, for example, these things tend towards the centralized approach. And I think this is the way things are. And I don't think it's wise, especially not when we're trying to do things quickly with a platform, but I don't think it's wise necessarily to change that. I think it's wise to build the systems that can understand all of that and be able to connect where things are decentralized and connect people into centralized areas of the system, such that one can navigate across the whole thing without really needing to worry about what is centralized, what's not centralized. In a way that we need a layer of abstraction that allows people to navigate the ecosystem of data and services, regardless of the underlying frameworks that each has decided to use.
Thank you, Guy. Could you summarize also by saying definitely there will always be data that has to be decentralized, and thus we should also work on being able to visit those data with software, something Wiro was talking about this morning as well, in order to probe these data with respect to the questions they are allowed to be asked.
So yes, I think that's a good conclusion, that there will always be decentralized data and one needs access to those data. But actually the software that visits the data in situ is also, remember, the software that can visit the data in the centralized source as well. So there's a natural reusability of that. And so if we write software that can access data, the underlying model doesn't need to matter so much. You just run it multiple times, perhaps, if you have multiple decentralized sources for a particular type. I think that's an exciting future, but I think in the biomolecular domain, we have to recognize that software doesn't always exist. And so actually people do also need access directly to data. And I think, again, in the decentralized situation, we have to find ways of connecting to local compute so that that can be accessed securely from outside, so that people can come and run their own specialized software and run their own questions on the data directly.
I fully agree with you there, Guy. And yes, we are working on that. You're probably familiar with the personal health train as an exercise to do it this way. Okay, there's another question for Guy. Impressive work on the platform. How is this work aligned with the EOSC priority? Oh, now it disappeared. Oh no, it still is there. How is this work aligned with the EOSC priorities? And a question for Karel, what is the link between the platform, the SCRIA and the MAR? Guy, maybe first you.
So I think that the COVID-19 platform is it's an opportunity to explore with some urgency and significant impact, so potential impact, different aspects of EOSC. So I guess it's a demonstrator or a use case or a driver project. And what it really will test and explore will be the ways in which policy has been aligned by EOSC, the way standards have been aligned, and the way process and technical systems have been aligned, and then also to find the gaps where these things haven't happened yet. So I guess it will be a test of the many things that EOSC offers and promises. And I think as we move, at the moment, the connection between the research infrastructures that cluster around EOSC that are relevant to COVID-19, the connection is more superficial than it needs to be. It's more a pointer and a cataloging. And what we really need to do is drill down. So we need much more direct data connections. And those will expose us to a lot of the EOSC tracks of work. And they will, I'm confident, will give us some real head starts in some areas, but also I'm pretty sure there'll be some gaps where we need to address things further. So I think there's a strong alignment. So Carol, I hand over to you for the second part of the question.
Thank you very much, Guy. Again, not a coincidence, maybe agree with you on your answer. And you basically answered most of the question for me as well. For me, indeed, COVID-19 is an important and impressive, by coincidence, unlucky coincidence that we have this virus, but by coincidence, a use case. And as also the session this morning showed, it is a huge task to combine the biological data, which you're doing at EBI, but it's even more difficult to combine the decentralized clinical data where Wiro was talking about. And in this case, for me, COVID-19 use case, which we will refer to in the SCRIA, by the way, clearly demonstrates where we stand with respect to the ability in short term to get things linked to each other. For me, but some people will not like what I'm going to say now, EOSC does not exist yet. Yes, we do have the EOSC platform. Yes, we do have what is called the portal. But that is, as Guy just said, a list of possible sources and a list of places where you can find services. It is not the EOSC core as we envision it and as we describe it in the MAR and in the SCRIA. And it is this EOSC core which we have to gradually build up with a number of federated data and then extend. I usually use the metaphor of the World Wide Web. If we are able to be gradually linking data and data sets, or in more general terms, digital data, digital objects to each other by referring to them, like we are able to link the web pages on the present World Wide Web, then we can build from there and build these linkages to the different data. So yeah, it is an important use case at this moment, and it definitely helps us to get growing in the right direction with EOSC. Anything to add there, Guy?
No, I don't think so. I think he's...
Okay, thank you. Then I'll go back to the other questions on the screen. There are no questions for Guy at this moment, and I refer to the fact that you have to leave at 2 o'clock again. So thank you very much, Guy, for attending this part of the session. What EOSC and EOSC Association can do for better cohesion among EU countries to get more legitimacy among countries' population. I'm not 100% sure whether I understand what is meant here, but if I translate it, then I would say, what can EOSC or the EOSC Association or both do with respect to making the systems we have in the different countries cohesive and to populate those? Well, I think the best we can do is offer things across boundaries, country borders, and that is very often not the case, so we can stimulate that. And we can definitely learn from each other. And some countries, and I usually call a good example Germany, again, not everybody is agreeing with me on that one, but have definitely decided that they will stimulate and help and create a strong network of the data approaches, data stewards, data curation in the different domains and between the different research performing organizations. And they've well, taken quite a bit of money for that. And I think this is a good example. We're trying to do something similar in the Netherlands, and I know other countries are doing something similar. A way to describe it, but this is a very general description, is that I think you could have what we call data competence centers in a research performing organization, be it a university or be it an institute. That data competence centers where there are data stewards helping the researchers in that organization can link to, let's say, a federated system in the country where you can join also the various disciplines, because for the different domains or disciplines, you would need different approaches. And I hope this to a certain extent answers your question. If anybody would like to add to that, please raise your voices. Then the lack of rewards for researchers is one of the issues to tackle to promote reusable data. How can and will the EOSC Association contribute to this? This is, again, a very good question, and also the way it's phrased. The EOSC Association can contribute to this. It is not the association that can solve this. We need the help of all the parties to solve this. And as it is written in the STRIA, the rewards and recognition system of many countries and of many places are too much dependent still on the number of publications and the number of citations in the traditional sense. And in general, I think this should be widened up, not only to include open science contributions for data, but also to include other things like education tasks in a research, or like in a university, sorry, or like the outreach people have to do with their work. All these should be parts of an appraisal system, and these appraisal systems are done within the organizations themselves. So the best we could do, I think, is what we, again, trying to do in the Netherlands, but this is the example I know, is probably a lot of work going on in Europe, is to jointly with the research performing organizations agree on a set of, let's say, dimensions on which we are going to appraise our researchers. And one of these dimensions definitely needs to be data, definitely needs to be open science in general. Again, any contributions, any additions to what I say, please raise your voices. If we take the W3C paradigm as a template for EOSC, what more will offer on top of RDA and open air? I do not understand the question. What more will offer? Is the question what EOSC will offer more? Maybe you could rephrase it. Question for Karel. How closely will the EOSC Association be able to steer the Horizon Europe projects? Do you see a strong role for the association beyond setting strategic priorities? Well, that depends on the Commission, how much the Commission is willing to be steered in this respect. So far, they've been very open in discussing these things. They've been very inviting for us to send our MAR, to send our strategic research agenda, and to, let's say, make our voice heard with respect to what we think is important for the Horizon Europe projects. And the best we can do is hope that, which is happening basically this month, that in the Shadow Program Committee, this will be taken up as good as possible in order to, let's say, result in calls for 2021, 2022 that are as close as possible, aligned with what is in the SRIA and what the association and thus all the parties in the association would like to see. Another important thing I would like to mention here, because it's related, is the Horizon 2020 project. There are quite a number of Horizon 2020 projects still running, and there's some new ones starting, for example, the Infra EOSC 03 and the Infra EOSC 07 call. And I think it is important that also there, these projects get aligned, get coordinated, and also there, even more, I would think the association could play a role if these projects are willing to let the association play a role, because the projects itself have an agreement with the Commission, are autonomous. The Commission cannot steer them, we cannot steer them. So it's on a voluntary basis, like, by the way, all the people that form a member, that will be a member of the association, do so on a voluntary basis. I hope that answers. Catherine, anything you would like to add here with respect to the Horizon Europe projects or the Horizon 2020 projects?
No, I mean, I think you're absolutely clear. What you say is absolutely right. I mean, the contractual agreement is between the European Commission and the coordinating partner. You know, so it is a matter of, you know, growing the EOS community based on goodwill. And I think the association may have some influence through the membership, because maybe some of the partners will be members in the association. But obviously, you know, yeah, I think it will need to be based mainly on goodwill and a real, I mean, the real aim of what we do needs to be in support of science in Europe. And if that is the common denominator that we remember, then I think, you know, the coordination activity should be possible.
Thank you, Catherine. There's a remark in the chat from Vinciana. And Vinciana says that in the new ERA communication, let's say, rewards and recognition is still equated with science quality, excellence, and highly cited publications. And I think we should address the Commission here that in this communication they could do better. From the side of CESAR, we did so, Vinciana, and I suggest that also from the side of EUA, you should do so if you've not done already. Then we move to the Slido again. If we take the W3C paradigm as a template, what more? Well, I tried to answer that, but I have not been able to because I do not really understand the question. Catherine, do you understand what is meant here?
No, I'm also hoping that somebody, whoever wrote this, will give us more, you know, will maybe add or edit.
Okay, thank you. Then how can EOSC support GDPR, other third country collaboration on sensitive data, US and eventually the UK? Well, we still trust the UK very much, to be honest. And I still trust the US, but you cannot trust everybody in the US, as you cannot trust everybody anywhere. I think the solution to this is very simple, not done, but phrased. Data needs to be fair. It's up to those to offer how open they are. So if people do not trust others, they should not give their data away. And data that is open for everybody is open for everybody, does also for the US, China, the UK, or whatever country. So the A in fair, accessibility, is an important parameter here for those that own the data or that are responsible for the data. It's maybe a better term than owning them. Take good care of what data can be open to whom. The A determines how open it is to group A, B, and C. We are in good contact, by the way, with China, with the US, with Australia, with Canada. We will have a session on those things later on this week. On Wednesday, Catherine has organized this session, so maybe she's able to say something about it. It's not specifically on GDPR, but it's on the linkage to the rest of the world, to the global approach for EOSC. Catherine.
I think it's Thursday, that session.
Yes, you're right.
Tomorrow
so,
is
did I say Wednesday?
Yeah, you did. Tomorrow is the implementation day.
Sorry.
No, so no, I think I agree with what you say here. I mean, GDPR is, of course, you know, for personal data. You know, it's legislation. Fair is principles. Is a different pair of shoes. How the EOSC in specific can support GDPR collaboration on sensitive data across, you know, towards the US, the UK, other third countries. I think that's a very specific question because I think you will probably find that in a lot of these cases, it needs more of the institutional national engagement rather than the international engagement on the EOSC level. But that's just a feeling that I have here.
Thank you, Catherine. I had to open a window, so I moved out for a second. There are no more questions and there's no clarification on the question which is on the screen.
But Rupert has just
raised his hand. Yeah. Rupert, please go ahead.
So I'm not sure you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, we can.
Yes.
Good. Okay, I had a little bit.
We
of
can
an issue
even
with
see
my
you there in the middle of Berlin, isn't it? Is that the dome?
No, it's actually in the Advanced Training Center of EMBL. But
okay,
this is only
okay.
image.
It looks like the dome in Berlin, but okay.
Looks a bit Hogwarts, really modern Hogwarts.
It is, yeah. So
go ahead.
Apologies for this. So I just became aware that there has been a question from Barbara Evert, in that session regarding the recognition of the layered model from one of the previous high-level reports. I think that model has evolved to a certain extent, and I think basically what we see as part of the analysis that we did in the sustainability working group, and also with the efforts in the architecture working group and other working groups, we look more towards a model that's built around in circles, and that partially builds on some aspects of the layered model. But here we see this iterative approach of growing the EOSC, starting from a horizontal layer of, if you like, some infrastructure or core services. There will be a very thin layer of core services that will enable the federation of data and complementary services. So that will be the absolute core and the bare minimum to start putting EOSC and the federation together. We will then have these federated layers around this. And of course, then comes with more time, successively this element that we call the EOS exchange, that will be a digital marketplace of additional services that will work and enable working with the federated data and assets that are put around. So that's probably the model that has been explored in our efforts, and that is also making is also making its way into the other working groups and also in this sphere. There was another question around the aspect of the expansion towards the public sector and probably also the other areas. Yes, of course, the research data will play a role, and the federation of that data and resource and service resource will of course be exposed further in the future to the public sector, will include federating of data from the public sector and also include the users from the public sector, and more widely also from the commercial or the industry sector, as we see, and like it, this is proposed in the iterative approach of the Iron Lady document that will also be highlighted to some extent tomorrow in this session that we have tomorrow morning. As Katrin already said, tomorrow there's the implementation session. So some of these aspects can be discussed tomorrow. And also in a later session, we have a session on widening the EOSC to the public and the commercial sector with a talk about Gaia X, where there was some large interest, I think, in the session on Monday morning already. And also we have other panelists in that session that will report on hopefully how EOSC is seen to be important for their sectors in the commercial and public sectors. So that's hopefully giving a little bit of a background of these around these questions.
Thank you, Rupert. And I may refer to you in a second for the question on the paradigm W3C. This question has now been explained. So it says, if we take W3C paradigm as a template for EOSC, what more will be offered by EOSC that is not currently offered by RDA and OpenAir? Well, my personal answer to that question would be as follows. If we look what percentage of the relevant research data is out there and is as fair as possible, then my guess is that it is less than 2%. And by relevant, I only mean that those data sets and those data that are seen as relevant by the researchers and by the researcher, because that's what counts. So that's definitely not all the data, and not all the data should be out there. So let me do a thought experiment, and it's not hypothetical, because it might be that the Commission and also some of the funders will be demanding from researchers, if they fund their research, that the data in the publication, and I'm only talking about the data that are physically in the publication itself, will also be put in a repository and will be made as fair as possible. Suppose we would demand that from every researcher in Europe. If we have 2 million researchers, then in a very short time, 2 million researchers would know what fair is, would have to struggle with how to make their data as fair as possible, and we would know how to find a trusted repository. Because otherwise they cannot continue doing research and being funded by these organizations. I have not met one single researcher that is against putting these data open, because they are open. They have put their data in their publication and they want for all the world to see. So nobody is objecting to the openness of that. The only objection, which is a correct objection, is it takes time. It's difficult. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it's difficult. And if you want to make your data as fair as possible, and if you want data curation, yes, it takes time. Therefore, we suggest to the organizations, please involve data stewards to help the researchers with that, because it does take time and it is difficult. I think these are things, if we offer a core, which Rupert just described, to link these data sets, which become fair and have identifiers, which we do not have at the moment, I think that will be a substantial contribution to what is now being offered by RDA and OpenAIRE, that are both doing great work and deliver a large contribution, but I don't think this is called EOSC. Rupert.
Yeah, I cannot say much more. I think it is the energy and the size of the community, I think, that EOSC can bring together. And just their recommendations on trying to link up build these links, build these core elements in a structured way, and to streamline and complementary to the efforts of RDA, just bring the pieces towards open science, open data together. I think that's a complementary effort that we see, and I very much agree to the policy and strategic element, Carl, you just mentioned. That's an absolutely important element. We see already certain funders in some countries really putting a lot of emphasis on these aspects of data management and openness of data, fair data, and I think that's absolutely useful part of the strategy, and we as EOSC association and as EOSC community should really be absolutely engaged with all the different powers and all the different elements that we have at hand to make that happen, being that through EOSC and through RDA, OpenAIRE, and many other activities that are striving towards the same mission and strategy.
Thank you, Rupert. Catherine, anything to add here?
No, I like very much the wording from Rupert on the energy of the community. I think that is the difference, the reach, the geographic and cross-disciplinary reach, I think, is different.
Yeah.
If I may quickly add to this, I think what I really liked and what I really took home from this morning's session, when Marianne Koopmans was speaking, there needs to be some payback to those who create the energy, who really are getting involved in publishing their data and curating their data, to attribute appropriate metadata, and to really put a lot of emphasis and effort in this. If we manage via policy actions and other elements within the EOSC community, to demonstrate this to the funders, to demonstrate this to those who are involved, who could create this kind of incentive, I think then we have an additional model of an additional element and argument to make fair data happen and in short time. I think that's a very important thing. I think this was also brought up in one of the earlier questions, and I can only agree that this is a very, very important step to be highlighted to policymakers and funders.
I agree, Rupert. There is some hope that we could put some pressure from the EOSC Association as follows. As one of the requirements in the EOSC Association, we ask from their members that they adhere to the EOSC declaration that was set up in 2017. And I reread that declaration carefully, and in the declaration there is statements about rewards and recognition. So if our members adhere to that declaration, then they also adhere to a better rewards and recognition system for this type of output. And so we can talk to them and say, come on, if you really adhere to this declaration, please change in your organization. There's many research performing organizations that have shown interest to become member. Please adhere to this declaration and change your rewards and recognition system and your appraisal system for the researchers. So there is a little bit of pressure in a gentle way, of course, we can exert from the association. May I move on to the next question? After the end of the current governance, are there mechanisms to avoid dissolution of the current working groups? Much knowledge has been gathered and centralized. The simple answer to this question is yes. We have discussed this question extensively yesterday in the clinic, and we came to the conclusion that we have to see to it that this transition is smooth. One of the suggestions made in that clinic was, why don't we invite these working groups to continue for a certain period of time to consider writing terms of reference for a new group in the association, et cetera, et cetera. So there will be different mechanisms we think about. And the last thing I would hope to see is that these working groups automatically dissolve because in theory, they are not part of the system anymore because EB, executive board, I mean, is not part of the system anymore. Catherine or Rupert, anything you would like to add to what I said?
No, all fine.
Okay. Then how can we guarantee the long-term access to data considering research infrastructure's life cycle after decommissioning? This is a tough one, not only for the research infrastructures that live on, let's say, project money, but all projects that live on project money, all across the research domain. So therefore, I usually make the distinction between who owns the data versus who is responsible for the data. If a PhD student does research, he or she owns the data, you could say, produced 10 minutes ago. But the PhD student will finish and leave, the staff member will finish and leave or get retired or whatever. And who owns the data then? I don't know. I think the institution that was responsible for the production. But more important is the question, who's responsible for the data? Who takes responsibility with respect to deciding whether these data are still relevant or whether they can be deleted? That's an important question which we should often ask ourselves. And the question, if we think they are still relevant, who takes care that they are still available and that there is long-term access? We have a special committee in the Netherlands at this moment dealing with this question. This committee is already at work for a long time because it is such a tough question. But I think it's definitely a question we have to work on with respect to the sustainability of data. Any addition, Rupert or Catherine?
I think this again highlights the role of domain-specific repositories. So the more we succeed to establish domain-specific repositories, the more we can also pool resources around funding and stability and long-term sustainability of these infrastructure elements, and then have a long-term view of the data that is coming out of the data, the research life cycle, and can be sustained. I think in some of the scientific domains, they do this already since quite some time, and they're quite succeeding in demonstrating the role of these central repositories and the importance to allow the fair access to the data sets. I think that's an important element to highlight. Thank you.
Then I see on the screen a remark from Philip Segers, which is now on top. This is not a question if I read it correctly, but thank you very much, Philip, for that support. And absolutely, we are aware of this. And again, I would like to extend from our side the invitation to EuroHPC praise with respect to working together. We see this as an important link, and it's been asked at least 100 times in this symposium and more than 100 times before. So the answer will be yes, please, let's work together. Then the next question, how do you foresee that the effort done by scientists to open data to remain open without sustainable and open services? Well, I think that's been addressed just a minute ago, and Rupert stressed the importance of, let's say, domain-specific or discipline-specific support and repositories. Anything anybody would like to add here? Not? Then I suggest we go to probably the last question. No, it's maybe not. Regarding the digital objects that Karel mentioned, I wonder what EOSC could contribute to W3C or IETF to promote, push, develop digital objects. Well, one of the best things that can be done, I think, is to push this as an important item for the Horizon Europe projects. If we look at the Horizon 2020 calls, not a single one, as far as I'm aware, was on metadata and ontologies, something which is urgently needed in many domains. As an example, not saying that this is the only thing, definitely not. The same thing holds for seeing to it that work with and combination of digital objects gets possible. Software is needed for that. And I really hope that either in the form of research and innovation calls or in the form of a procurement where I hope the association will be involved, this can be not immediately tackled. Well, it can be tackled, but probably not solved in a couple of days. But yes, I think the EOSC association, I have to distinguish between EOSC and the association, but could contribute here. Rupert.
I think one of the aspects that might come out and that could potentially be steered through EOSC is one of the objectives of EOSC is to enable cross-discipline and cross-domain federation and access of data, so that you can maybe bring together from different disciplines, and this involves also to make sure that the metadata standards that exist in the various domains, or in some domains even need to be further established and refined. They need to be brought together in a metadata framework, so that these metadata are hopefully, to some extent, I mean, I appreciate this is an absolutely complex problem, but there's a metadata framework that enables and supports the different access to assets in the various domains. And I think in this work, I think EOSC could contribute to standards that have been developed and further will be developed in the domain of W3C and IETF and maybe others.
Thank you, Rupert. And there are no new questions coming in. This fits excellently with the timing because we are at the end of our session. May I suggest everybody to stand up, stretch their legs, take something to drink. If there's sunshine outside, which there's not here, unfortunately, go and enjoy the sunshine for a couple of minutes and join us back for this afternoon session on the co-creation. Thank you very much for being here.